another of the common themes at TechNet Cyber this year is resilience. I asked Michael Malaret, Director of Sales Engineering for Department of Defense at Veritas, if everyone defines resilience the same way.
Probably not, right? So I think what we try to look at is we look at, the different levels of capabilities that are assigned to the mission criticality of an application, right? So you have certain applications that you would tier 0, tier 1, the types that can never go down, right? And they need to be treated differently than you would treat, a tier 2 or even a tier 3 app. A tier 3 app, you might not even have to recover it for days, right? Where a tier 2 app, you want to be able to bring it back in hours. And a tier 1 app, you hopefully never have to have it go down. And if it does go down, you need to have the infrastructure behind it to be able to do a full disaster recovery, right? So we look at it from that perspective, and at Veritas we have multiple solutions to be able to create and protect those different tiers in different ways, right? Using different capabilities. So,
as you talk to your customers across government, not just in the DoD space as we're talking about at this conference, but all over the place, what are the biggest holdups that they're having to being in the position that you just described to be able to recover from these various states?
I think some of the biggest holdups is I don't believe that they actually perceive the concept of data protection as being part of the cyber resilience strategy, right? So we need to absolutely get better at getting customers to understand that it is part of that layered defense strategy. And, in many cases, it can be the absolute last line of defense, but there are things that we can do to be part of that strategy before you ever have to go to that too as well, right? Yeah.
What are some of the things that the organization should be doing, and what are some of the things that industry partners can do in that equation?
So great questions. I think, one of the things that we are starting to see with some of the initiatives coming out of the government with the enforcement of NIST 800-171 through the CMMC program, right? As that evolves, I think that'll start to weed out some of the players that may not be up to speed to be able to support those mission critical applications and be part of that cyber resilient infrastructure. But more importantly, I think they have to start looking at the security posture of the company as a whole too, not just from a certification standpoint, but what they're doing with in the actual software framework, right? So when you think about the Executive Order 14028, where they started releasing requirements for the Secure Software Development Framework, software bill of materials, and things like that, companies are going to have to be able to respond to that appropriately, right? And then there's a very large push towards zero trust, and a lot of people talk about how they integrate with different pillars of the zero trust. I think it's more important that we start looking at solutions that are actually built with the zero trust mindset in the software application layer, right? And that's where you start to see the differentiation between, the true enterprise capabilities of somebody like a Veritas compared to some of the other competitors that are in the market.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said about CMMC, because I think there are a lot of people on both sides, industry and government, that we're worried that's going to become just a compliance exercise bolted on the way we've been talking about cybersecurity in government for 25 years, and not something that eventually became integrated. What drives that, do you think? What will make that work the way that the department envisions it?
Well, I think it will probably depend upon the criticality of the solution that you provide, right? So one thing that has definitely been determined from the executive order outputs is that data protection software, high availability solutions are deemed as mission critical, right? So they're in a classification of critical software. And I think the requirements on the critical software vendors are going to be greater than they will be on the others, right? And we've even had, recently we just had our, briefing for our security clearances, and they recommended that because of what we do, that we actually even try to go for a CMMC level 3 certification, as opposed to the level 2 we were initially targeting based upon some guidance we got from some third-party organizations, right?
We just have a couple of minutes left. What do you see, what's the end state that you're anticipating, both for the department? Obviously, our stuff is secure as part of it, but what's the broader end state that you envision as this process plays out?
I believe that we tend to I think one of the challenges that government actually comes up with is they tend to release individual permits based upon a specific requirement. And those requirements don't necessarily always mesh together properly, right? So if you think about the end state that you want to be able to achieve, I think it has to be a more comprehensive approach of interoperability within the entire landscape. And that, I think, is going to require us to actually create new types of requests for information and then ultimately RFPs that really make sure that there is that interoperability with individual applications. We have seen it a little bit in some of them where some particular vendor gets called out for another procurement where you have to be interoperable with that. I believe we'll probably see a lot more of that.
Mike, it's great to have you here. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you. Appreciate it.